emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 090.EX2816, certificate number 31179. Backgammon.
Now you like games
I sure do.
because you're a crafty thinker. You like puzzles. You like... We just in our last episode talked about a little puzzle trip we went on together.
That's right. I don't like the competitive angle of games.
Oh, really?
I mean, on a game show, I'm going to play to win. I'm a game day player, John.
I know you are, and one would say that you were one of the most competitive gamesmen in recent memory.
But around the dining room table, I think it's a bad look. I remember I got into a fight with my brother over a Clue game as a kid. And I was not wrong. He had actually said he didn't have the wrench.
And he did.
When he did, in fact, have the wrench.
Was he cheating, lying, or was he just not paying
I
attention?
think he's just not paying attention because you don't care. But that really stuck with me, though. What a stupid thing to get in a fight about. Lives are not on the line in a game of Clue. Mr. Body's already dead.
I love this has become an episode in the education of Ken Jennings.
It's just like what I like in a game is to excel. Like I don't care if I win or not.
You want to beat the game.
No, I just feel like at one point in the game, I did okay at the game. I grokked what the game was about, and I did well. I briefly had the longest road in Catan or whatever.
If someone comes from behind and trounces you at the end, that doesn't affect your feelings?
No, I don't have any ego bound up in casual gaming. And I think it's because on purpose, I'm like, this is a social event. I need to turn off the lizard brain that is just dying to just kick ass at categories.
Now that's interesting because most of these games, in fact, almost every kind of board game or card game or dice game, they are primarily social exchanges. But
what a weird basis for a social interaction, right?
Right, like let's
trying
fight.
to destroy each other by getting more nines in a row, making more melds.
Yeah, the games are all sort of war proxies, and the introduction of dice or randomness into it, luck is it's a very Greek way of introducing the gods into your battle.
So a chess game has the gods have no input,
right? But
it's just the craftiness of where you moved your elephant. But as soon as dice are involved,
or the shuffling of a deck,
that almost makes it higher stakes. Like, because I was thinking that the dice would be introduced to make it more of a open social thing that anyone can play, and not just people of the same skill level or particular masters. But actually, the stakes go way up if the gods are involved.
Well, that's right. And I mean, luck is never... Most people do not attribute luck truly to randomness. They imbue it with a kind of spiritual angle.
They attribute bad luck to randomness. Right. Good luck is earned.
Right.
Bad luck is something that's been done to them by an unfeeling universe.
Although people that have bad luck are... they're regarded as, I think in a lot of cultures, tainted, right?
Yeah.
You don't want someone with bad luck to touch your drink or
They get
or
thrown
whatever.
off the boat.
Yeah, they do.
We conscripted Kevin, and now the storm started. Let's
Or
throw
the-
Kevin into the Mediterranean.
Right. The wind died down and it won't pick up again until we throw the littlest midshipman overboard.
And we all know that Kevin has no control over the wind.
Poor
I
Kevin.
mean, the appeal of astrology is that there's vast cosmic forces that affect my little life, and that's plausible to me.
Right.
I mean, if the vast cosmic forces are very vast, of course.
Of course.
The ram moving in front of the sun could affect my life or whatever. But the other way, the idea that one little guy could affect the vast forces of wind and weather or whatever, seems a little less tempting to me.
I think the introduction of dice enables. I think maybe it was a gift to the gods because they could show favor to the ones they preferred without actually having to set fire to any bushes. They didn't have to, they didn't have to appear with their garments dragging in the mud.
They can, if it's a god who requires faith, a burning bush is a real tip-off.
That's right.
Chariots of fire descending from heaven would make me a believer.
Sure, especially to influence your victory over a table
Right.
game.
If I need to take out King Sennacherib and suddenly God sends fiery steeds, like even King Sennacherib should be converting to Judaism at this point. But it's a very subtle way in which God could literally play dice with the universe without making his presence known.
And it's maybe not surprising that the first dice made of bone were discovered in Mesopotamia, in the cradle of civilization, in the probably 3000 BC, so almost 5,000 years ago.
Are they quasi-religious? Because a lot of that early stuff started out as a divining tool that later became recreational. Let's find in the Bible. Often the will of God is decided by casting lots.
Casting lots, right? By
Dice or a dice proxy.
in fact, the original dice were found along with a board game that is effectively backgammon.
Wait, really?
Yeah. So dice were invented more or less along with the game of backgammon in the city of in present day.
Imagine finding
Iraq.
a ziggurat and going into some room and it's just stacked floor to ceiling with Candyland and Uncle Wiggily and stuff like that, but on terracotta tablets.
The game of backgammon is one of the oldest board games, or one of the oldest games.
Is it effectively unchanged, or is it just
More or less unchanged? The original game, as discovered in these excavations, is basically the same setup, right? There are 12 points per side. There are 2 rows, and gameplay is presumed to go in a kind of horseshoe shape.
Yeah, that's
around.
the thing about these games is we don't have the instructions.
Although we do often have, they're referred to in so much literature of the time, like ancient writings routinely refer to backgammon. And so we are able to reconstruct gameplay.
I know that Egyptian game, Senet or whatever, like they have the board and they know how the pegs go in. It's clear what it's for, but apparently the tradition of how to play was purely oral. Right. So there's a bunch of competing theories as to how you would what happens if you land on the space with the skull. You know?
Yeah, and also, I mean, if you see a drawing of it or a mosaic of it, it's still not clear, like exactly how the game's being played.
Right, we can see, I think there are hieroglyphics where you can see people playing Senet. We're like, aha, this is a game. Right. You can see 2 children playing, but it doesn't answer. So in the end game, do I have to land directly on the space, or do I, that kind of stuff is not handled on the tomb wall.
But backgammon was discovered in King Tut's tomb. Like it was popularized throughout the Middle East, and continues to be popular there today, and mostly unchanged. Minor improvements, minor variations have been made over the millennia, but it's those old boards are recognizable to us today. And backgammon is called tables in much of the world, and was called tables in.
Why is it called tables?
Because it's on a table. Well, it's a table game, a tabletop game.
If you play it on it, well, then presumably you need a name to distinguish it from all other games.
Well, except
That was the only
It was
game.
the only one.
Hey, does everybody want to play a game tonight?
It was on a table. It was called Tables.
It's probably older than chess then.
It is,
right?
yeah.
If it's really 5,000 years old,
Older-
that's insane.
Older than chess, and always played with 15 checkers.
They got it right the first time.
They really did. That's right.
It's like Coke.
And it was always a game that that you could bet on the results. The thing about backgammon is that that sort of like poker, it has an element of chance, but it's also a game of skill. And so it's not like just betting on a roll of the dice. The dice add that element of that makes the game easy for anyone to play, right? The rules are pretty simple. Although every single time I sit down to play backgammon, I have to remind myself of the rules. So they are simple to understand, but at least for me, difficult to retain.
I have the worst memory for game rules, and I don't know what that says about me. Like, is it procedural? Would I have a hard time taking off in an airplane too? But I always have to. I've played backgammon exactly once.
No, come on, that can't be true.
And it was just recently. Like, I played backgammon for the first time a year or two ago with a friend who had kind of just rediscovered it. And I think he remembered. It was like how the baby boom has echoes and shockwaves through time. Like, I think he was remembering it as a signifier of grown-upness from the 70s when he was a kid.
Right.
And he wanted to try it out now that he was the same age as the adults he saw playing it. And it took me maybe 15 minutes to learn the rules. And I think I won, which means there must be a lot of luck involved because I'm not a good player.
I mean, it's an obvious game, and also, it depends on the skill level of the person you're playing against. There's always going to be an optimal play, kind of like any like chess or even Jeopardy. There's a way you can program a computer to know what the best move is in any given instance.
It's not a hard problem like teaching a computer chess.
It is a very hard problem. And in fact, computers being programmed to solve backgammon games predates computers being programmed to solve chess games. The first instance of a computer beating a human being in a competitive game was in 1979. The then world backgammon champion, whose name was Luigi Villa, was beaten by a computer programmer named Hans Berliner. So it was really a war of the cultures.
Was he? Yeah, exactly. Germany versus Italy. Did he always say, "I'm a Luigi. I'm gonna win"?
He lost at backgammon and he jumped down a pipe.
Now, he couldn't have been the first man to lose at backgammon since he was the world champion.
No,
there's no way the computer. He was the first.
The first to lose to a computer. The first person ever to lose a game to a computer.
But the first champion. The computer had presumably beaten other weaker players.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
In the run up to its big match with Luigi.
Yeah, the first time a computer challenged the reigning.
The first time computer became better than all humans, I guess, was at the sport of backgammon.
Although Hans Berliner was quick to say that the computer had gotten a lot of good dice rolls, so the computer had luck on its side. God smiled on the computer that day.
That's a sign that God wants computers to take all our jobs.
That's right.
It's the first
That
domino.
was the first sign. Before even Watson, back when computers took up a whole building. So, Ken, I have a problem.
I assume you do. Which of your several problems concerns you, John?
Well, I went to an amusement park yesterday.
That's not a problem.
And
that sounds great.
Well, I was a little under-amused. The roller coaster was too flat. The fun house was not fun.
It's just a house.
The lines were super long. What I'm telling you is I did not enjoy this amusement park.
And the whole point there is enjoyment.
So what is wrong with me? Is it me?
No. Were you filled with alienation? I'm the only one here not having fun.
I mean, I always feel that way from the moment I wake up in the morning, but even more so here at this unfun experience I had at the amusement park.
I don't think that's an uncommon experience. I mean, the fact is that today, with so many pleasurable stimuli whizzing at us every second due to the technological hell we've created for ourselves, we're on this hedonic treadmill, and that includes amusement parks. Everything just seems less fun than it should. But there is a group for folks like you.
Huh? Tell me more.
I am texting you right now the number for the Ride Enhancers Collective.
The Ride Enhancers Collective.
This is a group dedicated to making amusement parks better for under-amused people like you. Even you, John. They came up with the idea they're the ones, for example, that came up with the idea of putting Legos, bins of Legos in the lines at Legoland.
Well, see, now that's a genius idea. Well, if they can help me enjoy Legoland more, well, surely they can help me enjoy any amusement park.
No problem, John. And I want to extend this offer to all of our amusement-impaired listeners out there. Please, if John's experience resonates with you, check out the Ride Enhancers Collective. Use the code OMNIBUS at checkout for a special discount.
Now, that's the Ride Enhancers Collective with an omnibus code at checkout.
I never think of backgammon as a particularly Eastern game, which is funny because chess, I'm always like, the great Persian Indian game of chess. But backgammon seems to me to be played by, I don't know, old European men at a club or at a waterfront resort of some kind.
Go on.
It seems because it's got felt. I don't know. It looks like a gambling. It looks very grown up to me. Chess, I feel like
it's just a kid's game.
It's not a kid's game, but it's academic. It looks like checkers.
Right.
It looks like something that, you should be taught just to be a good citizen. Whereas,
but also the figures in chess evoke a kind of medieval, crusade-y kind of world.
And definitely the kind of militaristic thing you're talking about. It's a war game in miniature. Whereas the aesthetic of backgammon seems very much, as a kid, it seemed to me to be kind of a James Bond, like this is a forbidden part of adulthood. There's felt, there's dice, there's gaming, maybe there's a woman draped around your shoulders. It's not that at all, but it felt like, craps or something like that to me as a kid.
Well, in fact, it was that. And your memory is being affected by a period of time where backgammon went from being a kind of ancient and esoteric drawing room game like cribbage or any number of, of sort of similar.
It's like an old folks home
activities. To a brief period, about a decade or two, where backgammon was an extremely fashionable, high-stakes, grown-up casino game being played by all the stars and celebrities and appearing in films and being, kind of featured in profiles in the New York Times.
This is so improbable. It must have been a CIA plot. I don't know what national interests were served, but can you imagine trying to explain to someone now that, something as random as backgammon used to be a glamorous worldwide fad?
Well, I can imagine it because I'm actually trying to do that right now.
But it would be like telling somebody, hey, Snakes and Ladders was always played by, the jet set during the Eisenhower. I mean, it's weird, right?
Well, and in fact, once you introduce the idea of a conspiracy or that the CIA was involved, those fires will be stoked by the fact that backgammon was popularized in the mid-'60s by a white Russian by the name of Prince Alexis Obolensky, who was a member of
was he real prince or fake prince?
He was a real prince, a descendant of Russian aristocracy, who was born immediately before the Russian Revolution. And then his family escaped the Bolsheviks, as we all are trying to do. And
every time I go to the ballot box.
And ended up in New York. And he was raised here in New York as kind of, in the style of the White Russians of the time, which is to say...
this was not unusual at the time.
Yeah.
Europe and America were crawling with these dispossessed barons and aristocrats.
And they didn't have they weren't able to escape with all their money, but they did have their titles and they had their heirs. And so
did they have heirs or did they have put on heirs?
They had both heirs and they put on heirs. And so you often see in literature of the time or popular culture this trope of a kind of Russian aristocrat who maybe has a Fabergé egg hidden under the mattress, but has to scramble and becomes kind of a player and a huckster.
Often there's some kind of they could attach themselves to a wealthier household.
That's right.
And everybody's happy to have Alexei teaching their daughter voice lessons. And,
or
and he's a comical Slavic figure.
Marry a much older heiress and esquire her around wearing a monocle. It's a fairly commonplace 20th century notion.
They're figures of fun in old movies,
right?
Which is very sad because these people used to be able to whip any of the serfs they wanted.
Well, it's
and now
sad.
They have to.
It's sad unless you enjoy dispossessing the 1%.
Oh, which I absolutely do.
Seeing them in squalor.
Me and my Trotskyite dads are always talking about this at the book club.
Seeing them wander around backgammon clubs looking for a game. But one of and Alexis Oblensky. He dabbled. He was a dabbler, like a lot of us fallen aristocrats.
Do you consider yourself to be?
My father's
do you have a kinship with
my father's family. Yeah, my father's mother's family definitely also sort of put on airs of having been descended from, and not incorrectly, descended from the landed gentry of the South in the United States. So my great grandfather was
a slave owner.
well, a lot of them were, yeah. But he was Thomas Page, who was a colonial governor of Virginia before the Revolution, and Thomas Jefferson's college roommate. So
Thomas Jefferson's college roommate.
Yeah. So we have this connection to the colonial era and his descendants all through Virginia, migrated to Kentucky.
Because if you sat in a beanbag chair and smoked weed with Thomas Jefferson, you get whatever you want.
But by the time they moved out here to Washington, they had no money or influence. At the end of the Civil War, in fact, we have in the family a document where President Grant pardons my only 5 great-grandfathers away, pardons him for his rebellion against the Union. And as part of that pardon, he's not allowed to ever take up arms against the nation again. But also, they lost everything, right? I mean, they lost the plantations. They lost the...
It's not a very good pardon if it has that clause in it.
Yeah, right.
What kind of a pardon is that, President Grant?
Sure, it's a little bit of like,
Sure. If you're really going to pardon me for the old stuff, then let's leave the future to the future.
Yeah, pardon me for everything.
Maybe I'm going to lead another insurrection. That's the gamble you take.
Well, they moved out here to Washington and continued to kind of lead insurrections, but not ones that look very good. Not that the Civil War looks very good either, but
nobody's made nostalgic movies about the other.
Not really.
Your ancestors' other rebellions.
There are an awful lot of black sheep in my family. You might say that at least on that side, I'm kind of one of the gentler ones.
Knifing your neighbors to take over their fields or their mining claim is not an insurrection so much.
No, that's right. That's right. But so those people, those of my ancestors did kind of waltz around with a lot of sense of not just entitlement, but of, to the manor born kind of idea of themselves.
Temporarily down on their heels.
Just down on their heels, but they will win the day. Their superiority will be revealed. And it was a lot as a kid to kind of shake off, because that is a pernicious mentality.
But it does explain some of your kind of White Russian, you come from a long line of confidence and talent and prestige, and you bring that with you in any room. And that should be part of the perks of being friends with John Roderick and letting him stay at the Chateau Marmont with you, right?
That, and also that family in particular always had children late in life. So my grandmother was born in 1886. So I'm only one generation removed from a very Victorian way of speaking.
It would be funny if that's why they did it. Let's have our children late so that generations are very long, and therefore we can say we're more closely. All of our heirs will be more closely connected.
That's right.
To days of antiquity and yore.
That's right.
They'll have the accompanying prestige.
I'm a knowable distance from all the great events of American history.
Your dad was college roommates with William Henry Harrison.
My uncle was in college with both William F. Buckley and George Herbert Walker Bush. They were all members of the same little cadre.
Secret society?
Yeah.
And my uncle's still alive, whereas the other two are not. So who wins?
Was
the
there-
Rodericks again.
Was there a tontine? When Barbara Bush died, he's like, I'm so close, I can taste it.
Yes, made it.
So this particular White Russian.
But this White Russian began
backgammon.
He did, and during this post-war period, like you hinted at the fact that White Russians were kind of thick on the ground. But after the war and in the period between the wars, there was a migration of wealthy Europeans to the United States because the rise of fascism, the rise of Bolshevism, the upheaval and instability in Europe meant that a certain class of people kind of would rather take their
gems and go.
Take their gems and go. That's right. Take their chances in New York City, rather than wait for various armies to run over your little duchy in Moravia. So there was a kind of there was a lot of European culture that came to the United States and formed a sort of social, less intellectual but more social world in the U.S. And the Americans have always felt, I think,
we're bereft of that kind of sophistication, right?
we are, and
We've
we
missed out.
and we crave it.
Yes.
Or a certain segment of America has always craved the endorsement of a prince, or the history that it brings, but also the sense of privilege or of belonging.
I blame literature. Like it seems very glamorous to have a dauphin, and a man in an iron mask and all that. And if all your ancestors can claim is that they, started the first cereal mill in Grand Rapids or whatever,
perfected the plow.
It's not the same. So literature teaches you, that's the good world that you must have, and we're a country without it.
And it's part of and it exists even now in the sense that people in Europe or even in Canada kind of look down at Americans as coarse, as
not because of anything we've done, of course.
Well, but because of this, in a way, because the meritocratic mentality of the United States means that someone who works hard but has no class can end up with enough money to walk into Buckingham Palace.
That's the stereotype. The vulgar American millionaire who's like, wow, you got some nice things here, but you should come down to our place.
That's right. And that stereotype kind of filters down to a general attitude about Americans as not having whatever it is, the ineffable sort of class. Even as a European or Canadian or someone who disavows the negative aspects of a class-based society, you can still look down your nose at someone that has less class than you feel you have.
We also had for much of the 20th century, we had a suddenly affluent middle class who could travel.
Right.
And so suddenly European restaurants who were accustomed to dealing with people who knew how to act in a European restaurant suddenly had a flood of people who didn't, and they were American.
They were American, and they had invented a new kind of plow, or their grandfather had. And here
they were going to tell the waiter what was what. Right. This soup is cold.
Why are there too many forks on the table?
This is a vichyssoise, but it's cold. Take it back.
I mean, we all love that. We love teasing Americans as much as anyone. But in the 1950s and early 60s, as Europe recovered from World War II and was cheap for Americans to travel, and also we had a generation of veterans who had been to Europe, and now had
show their families around.
That's right, had families, now had some money to spend, and wanted to go back and go to France and go to Italy and Switzerland and revisit these places.
Some of them had PTSD and did not.
Right,
but we think about the ones who got out psychologically unscathed and are excited to show.
And I don't know how many American servicemen took their families to Okinawa or to Leyte, but going to Paris is kind of is something maybe that your wife or your kids would be interested in.
We're not going to go to Normandy, but I had a great weekend in Paris.
And so all of that kind of sophistication, the idea that we have that Europe has has a level of kind of culture and understanding that we can only get by buying it or by rubbing elbows with it
Or acquiring some skill.
At it.
And like
right?
it might be ordering a drink, or in this case, it might be the rules of backgammon.
Well, so we see in this period a lot of European influence in the United States, and it comes.
I was thinking about the Russian tea room. That was classy to go have borscht.
The idea of a sports car, even.
Yeah.
The idea of a small, lightweight car that you can zip around narrow roads. This wasn't an American.
America
mentality.
did not have narrow roads hugging a mountainside.
No,
we had big, flat, wide roads.
That's right. Our cars, our instinct was to build cars that could just go super straight and fast.
How wide is the lane? Okay, I want fins that are that width.
Let me get right out to the edge. We see it in the popularity of James Bond.
Yeah,
we see it in the kind of exoticism of espionage as a thing that took hold of our imaginations, because we were in a quiet war with the East.
and it's not an American spy. It very easily could have been an American spy, but whether it's the dapper James Bonds or the kind of prosaic John le Carré heroes, we prefer them to be European. That gives them an extra cachet.
Right, and an ability to what James Bond did was fight the Cold War by looking good and being super good at dice, right?
Yes, golf and sex,
right?
And and knowing what to order.
Golf
exactly.
and sex. That's right. Knowing knowing that the soup was meant to be cold.
Getting mad at a bartender for making a martini the right way.
But so Prince Oblensky manipulated this cultural moment and started to promote backgammon as a game of the cultured, the aristocrats. It was a secret and lost art that was popular in the drawing rooms that Americans only could dream of having access.
Was this true in any sense? Was it a relic of those drawing rooms?
Well, when backgammon made it to Europe really early, presumably with the Roman legions, but it became, like so many wonderful things in medieval Europe, became kind of the province of the moneyed classes. I mean, who had the time?
No one else has time to play a game after dinner. You fall into bed.
And so it was an aristocratic pastime, and it went through several iterations in relationship to the church. There were quite a few periods where the church would come out against backgammon because it seemed like a game of chance, or it was it was prohibited, it was banned, but it always remained a secular pastime, and there are tons and tons of references to tables, as it was called, in all of the medieval, literature, but also kind of just the daily accounts, people's diaries. You see kings talking about it being a diversion in their court, and people were gambling over games. I
assume that's why the church was not into it.
Church wasn't into the gambling aspect, but the church was never able to stamp it out. And it didn't percolate down to become a game of the street any more really than chess did. Because
it would be funny if a bunch of guys in an alley, after they're done parking the cars, they're all playing dice, but they've got a backgammon game, a backgammon board on the ground. They've got the dice and they've got the doubling cube.
And everybody's throwing their money down,
right.
Yelling at the game.
That's what I want.
So it was a genteel game, but had always kind of, and in fact, the name backgammon is Old English.
I don't even know. Gammon is something in the game.
Gammon in backgammon is an aspect of the game, but gammon is just Old English for game.
Oh.
So backgammon just means back game.
Do we know what the back is in reference to? Is it something about the mechanics of the game?
It is, because you can, as you're making progress toward your safe zone in the game of backgammon, if someone lands on your checker, they send you all the way back.
So it's one of these games that's named after a bad thing that happens during the game, like Sorry.
like Chutes and Ladders, right?
Well, the ladders are great.
Yeah, it's the chutes.
Shoots will get you.
Yeah. So backgammon, I mean, I'm hoping that most futurelings, regardless or irregardless of their corporeal forms or lack thereof, still have enough tentacles or imaginary tentacles to be able to play backgammon, because it's the oldest game, and hopefully it will retain that title.
I like how that's your assumption about no matter what your species, we know you must love backgammon.
You're still playing backgammon,
For
right?
sure.
Because once you have an oldest game, you don't stop playing that, and your new oldest game is Ms. Pac-Man, right? I mean, you have to
You will always have the oldest games and the newest games.
Right.
It's the ones in between that get forgotten.
But the way backgammon is played, each player arranges a series of checkers in different groupings.
It has triangles too, which seems a little transgressive because good games have squares.
Yeah, and the triangles are the points where your checkers land.
Yes,
and you can stack your checkers up. But if you ever leave a checker on a point where it's not stacked with another one, like if you have two stacked there, it's kind of similar to the way that a pawn can be protected by another pawn diagonally.
Yeah.
A checker that's on top of another checker can't be bounced, can't be jumped upon,
Can't be gammoned.
can't be. Is that what it is? Gammoned?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I don't really know how to play backgammon very well, but.
So a lot of people who are listening to this in hopes of unearthing the rules to backgammon are going to be disappointed.
Well, and there are a lot of people who know backgammon really well who are like, I can't believe these two ding-dongs.
We are going to get so many letters.
If you are in the future and looking for the rules of backgammon,
Stop listening.
please get your shovels out and dig for our jeweled hair.
Because what's really fun is talking about the cultural impact of something.
That's right.
And that's what we're going to do.
That's right.
We assume you don't want to play the game.
You can find the music of the Rolling Stones on your own. We're going to talk about the culture of the Rolling Stones. But if your checker is unguarded, it can be returned all the way to the start of your progress across the board, and you have to then begin again to move throughout the entire game, right? And so you can have all of your checkers in the safe zone at the end of the board, and one remaining, and that checker can be bounced all the way back to the front, and you have to go through this whole
It's
process again.
It's just like life. You think you got everything sewn up, and then one little thing goes wrong, and it literally takes you back to square one.
And so much of this is down to a roll of the dice. That there has been this confusion over the centuries. How much of this is a game of chance? How much of it is a sport?
In some cases, you can model it. You can run a million computer simulations and say poker is this % luck and this % chance.
And now we do know that a skillful backgammon player has an advantage over time. Although and very much like poker, I mean, a skillful poker player can beat the odds of the game. And that's true of backgammon too. As recently as the 1980s, there was a lawsuit in the state of Oregon. The state of Oregon sued a man by the name of Ted Barr for running a backgammon tournament, and they said because of the dice element, it was a game of chance, and therefore it was subject to being regulated by their gaming authorities. Like it was just basically like buying a lottery ticket, and the state of Oregon wanted to tax it as a lottery. But in the presentation of the case, the judge determined that it was a game of skill, and so Ted Barr prevailed, and that was as recently as 1982.
It's interesting, like how much skill is required to make something a game of skill.
Yeah, well, I mean, enough that poker is, and even blackjack is, which seems like, blackjack.
Really, there's case law saying that blackjack is a game of skill.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, it's not.
You've got 4 chances, and there's always 4 choices, and there's always a right one.
That's right. You can beat the game of blackjack if you're counting the cards and if you know the right move at any given moment.
But you'll get kicked out of the casino.
If you get kicked out of the casino, you have to wear a fake mustache. That's right.
They don't want people who can win. There wouldn't be any casinos if everybody won.
We have a friend who is a professional blackjack player.
Who plays blackjack?
Who is a blackjack player that's banned in casinos around the country and I think maybe even around the world.
Do I not know who this is?
Well, I don't think you do. Our good friend Stephanie Drury is married to a man named David Drury, who played in a band called Tennis Pro here in Seattle. And David is a world-famous card counter and blackjack player who has been escorted out of every casino in the West.
I've read about this. People start to develop disguises in hopes of outwitting the guys at the cameras looking for card counters. They don't have to let you play, apparently.
No, they don't.
They can kick out whoever they want.
He continues to go play professional blackjack in places because I guess there are enough casinos that either don't bother kicking him out or don't know to kick him out.
I mean, in the past it was all manual. At some point, their casinos will adopt facial recognition.
I think they're working on it now, or they have it. Yeah. Anyway, Prince Oblensky started to popularize this as a way of sort of social climbing. He put on his ascot and started promoting backgammon as a kind of,
let me show you the new thing in Europe.
That's right. Or let me introduce you to and the thing is he left Russia when he was 2 or 3 years old, but almost certainly affected a glamorous accent while doing this.
Even though all these guys were probably raised in Paris or Vienna, right?
The doubling cube is an American invention, in fact, and the doubling cube was something that transformed backgammon play from something where, I mean, if you're betting on points, which is how the game is how you normally bet, you can wager up to whatever amount you put on a point, mm-hmm. but it doesn't have that poker aspect where you can raise once you see that you're doing well. You can put the other person into a posture where they have to either have the confidence to play out the game, or they can be bullied or cowed into surrendering.
And there's no bluffing in backgammon because everyone can see the whole game situation. There's no hidden information.
Right. There is cheating in the form of loaded die.
Oh, right.
Which is the kind of
is that how the computer won?
It's a plague on the game of backgammon, and that actually becomes a plot point in the James Bond film Octopussy, which we'll cover in a minute, I hope. But the doubling cube was introduced in New York City in the 1920s as a way to kind of up the stakes and to say, like, okay, I hereby challenge you now to double our stakes, and then your opponent can say, like, I double your double stakes. And the cube...
Did that spread worldwide, or is there still a non-American version of backgammon that does not have the doubling cube?
Backgammon remains super popular in Armenia and Greece and Egypt. And I think in general, the doubling cube has kind of gone out into global backgammon.
Yeah,
but I think
USA.
I mean, I don't play with the doubling cube. You can still play backgammon without using it because you can play backgammon without betting.
Yeah.
It's you can't really play poker without betting.
I learned to play poker as a kid on an airplane with no betting, and I was like, why does this game exist?
Yeah, right.
This game sucks so hard.
You have to bet matchsticks or pieces of chewing gum or something to make poker have any meaning.
The card-related rules of poker are dull.
Backgammon, you can actually just take the satisfaction in because backgammon has a real in-your-face aspect to it, because you can choose not to crush your opponent. You can use the dice rolls to try to win while also allowing your opponent to go on their merry way. But you can also play it as a very competitive, very like crush your enemies style too. And this is one of the ways. I mean, this is true also of billiards, where part of what makes the rules difficult to remember is that some of them are maybe not obvious in terms of like what the necessity is. Like there are rules of backgammon that say you must take the best play, or you must play the dice a certain way. and you can ignore that. Right in this same way in billiards, you can kind of make up your own rules around the fringe.
And is that related to this idea that you can choose how gentlemanly to be to your opponent?
In a casual game, if you're playing a tournament game, no, the rules apply. But if you're sitting around with your kids and playing backgammon, and you see an opportunity to send them to their rooms crying, you're not obligated to, right? You can, and you're not obligated to, and you wouldn't be fake losing. You can play around one another.
But there is that tradition in European sport that fair play is maybe more important than it would be in its American equivalent. Like you see lots of soccer related discussions of, well, this guy did this thing that was legal, but now come on, we don't play like that. He was pretending to fall over,
And I think in backgammon, no, yes, you're right. Let me take that back. There is a sense of decorum in backgammon, and you can play the game coarsely, where people go.
What is that? What are the vulgar strategies?
Yeah, the vulgarity would be to. The culture of backgammon is extremely sophisticated. It's an easy game to learn and an easy game to play, but a very difficult game to master. So, I wouldn't know what move in a backgammon game would cause offense, and to whom.
But somebody might make a little tisking noise with their tongue.
Yeah, as you bounced your checker along, and it's true in poker too. I mean, I play a regular game of poker with people who are better poker players than I am, and they're often disgusted with the way I play my hands because it's not.
There is a sense that you're bringing down the table somehow. I don't know if there's a certain. It's still a vestigial belief in a god who will not smile on your table if the play is not up to his standards.
I won a tournament one time. I won $900 by keeping a 4-5 offsuit and betting before the flop on a 4-5 offsuit.
It's not a smart play.
And, and it flopped 2, 6, 7.
That's just like you had in mind.
And the other guy had a pair of kings or whatever.
Come on.
And there was a third king came up on the board, and we were the last two players, and I'd been playing like this all night, just like, woohoo, I don't know what I'm doing. And when we showed our cards, he stood up from the table, threw his cards down, confronted me like, how dare you? And I was like, well, I don't know. And he was like, and he started yelling, and everybody around the table was yelling at me. There were a lot of people at this event.
I feel like all you need to do is let the laws of probability take care of that. Yeah. Like if somebody beats you once, you just got to suck it up.
And I said, I had a lot of money, and I just playing the cards, and 4 or 5 offsuit looked good to me at the time. And there's no arguing, right? I mean, I won.
I have a friend who's a championship contract bridge player. And that's very much like the culture of the game is almost more important than any other angle.
Right.
Because, something about being at a table with people, it overlaps with a lot of our ideas about table manners and deference and courtesy. And yeah, it turns out there's a lot of ways to piss off your opponents at bridge without breaking a single rule.
Backgammon has a lot of that. And some of it is affectation, and some of it really is baked into the kind of the feltedness of the board, the satisfying sound of the dice in the leather cup.
I'm friends with a game designer, and he thinks a lot about the game aesthetic. If the board jiggles a little bit, people are going to be 2% less likely to play it.
Yeah, right. It looks cheap.
They think about that kind of stuff in great detail.
Well, so our Prince Obey succeeds in making this game popular among a certain kind of expatriate class, right at a time when that class was being what had become a sort of a fascinating like old world to the new moneyed class in the United States. And so almost predictably, backgammon then became a fixture at the Playboy clubs because Hugh Hefner, who was always looking for a way to velvetize himself and And I mean, Hugh Hefner, to his credit, was somebody who integrated his clubs and his and the entertainment in his clubs a long time before that was happening in other places in the U.S.
The ethos of Playboy as a magazine is that you can be a Playboy.
That's right.
It's kind of it's a guide to emulate. So there is some sense that it's not just for a smart set that does not include you.
Right. Here's how you tie a bow tie. Here's how you drive an Aston Martin, and here's how you play backgammon. And so backgammon became kind of a way of that Hugh Hefner sophisticated the Playboy universe.
That's funny.
And it went from there in the way that faddish games do. No one could quite remember where the origin of it was, but suddenly everyone in 1969 who wanted to demonstrate their class and sophistication started to play backgammon. And
just like Texas Hold'em in the early 2000s.
Very much like that. And by like 1972, the main sort of makers of backgammon boards reported that, in 1972 alone, they sold more backgammon games than in the 10 years prior combined. Like the game just exploded, and suddenly you saw it everywhere. There's a famous picture of Mick Jagger and Jerry Hall playing backgammon in Montserrat, and it was something it was portable, and you could sort of set up a little backgammon game, and you could play it fairly quickly, much more so than chess. And
you can play it casually while you're doing other things.
That's right.
Unlike chess, right?
That's right. You could keep a backgammon game going. You could walk up on a backgammon game and knowing whose turn it was, kind of suss out the board pretty quickly.
I feel like I can't even see a backgammon board today without kind of smelling Benson and Hedges hundreds. Like it just smells like 1970s cigarette smoke to me.
The first World Championship was held in Vegas in 1967. And then it kind of moved around. The first champion was a man by the name of Tim Holland, who also, not maybe coincidentally, was also a bridge champion. There were a lot of people coming from chess champions and from other sort of similar sports that also had a gift for backgammon.
But because this has a big purse.
That's right, and the purses started to grow. There was a style where a rich fan could actually kind of buy an interest in a backgammon player and say like, I'll put up the money, but then I collect the winnings. You could have backgammon players in tournaments actually playing on your behalf. And the game exploded and the purses exploded. The World Championship moved to the Bahamas for a while, kind of in the mid-'70s, in keeping with this
James Bond,
this sort of Sean Connery vibe, and then maybe not surprisingly moved to Monaco. And Monaco is still where the World Backgammon Championships happen today.
So this continued, and it's funny. There's no history of international backgammon tournaments until it just gets invented from the whole cloth, even though it's such an old game.
Right, and an old game. I mean, backgammon was considered. Backgammon is old enough that it's haram in the Quran by name.
Oh, interesting.
Like
is that why Omar Sharif plays bridge?
Muhammad
He's not allowed to play backgammon.
Said that if you play backgammon, it's like putting your hand in pig's blood.
Well, I don't like it either, but I wouldn't go that far, Muhammad.
And what ended up happening was that, like a lot of games, that became super faddish. And this also was a period in the mid-'70s where chess was very faddish because the Fischer-Spassky championship made it like this tremendous global now spectator sport.
And then the dawn of the first chess, play along chess or electronic chess boards made it kind of a real focus of nerd culture. The kind of people who might have been interested in chess clubs anyway were suddenly reinvigorated by it. Seemed like it was a futuristic thing now. And
backgammon, I think, got a little bit of associative popularity as a result of chess being kind of hard to play.
Bookstores were just full of backgammon books.
Yeah.
Like you need to have this on your shelf. It's the backgammon lifestyle.
And so it fell out of fashion in the mid-'80s, partly because the game just had run its course, partly because the rise of this sort of next generation of games, the Trivial Pursuits, the Scrabbles, kind of diffused the energy around this kind of board game.
There was a series of board game fads that worked better as party games for yuppies. All your friends can sit around and play. Well, first it was Trivial Pursuit, then it was Pictionary, then it was Taboo and Cranium. There was always a kind of a new game to play with your
and you could have
friends.
4 people playing instead of it being a head-to-head game.
Yeah, it's a party.
There is a form of backgammon that 3 people can play or multiple people can play, but it's like 2 people comprise a team and they play against another person.
Oh, I don't like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's called chouette. I don't understand it either.
Just play it right.
But then the ultimate death knell or death blow to backgammon as a sport of kings or like a tournament that would have a bunch of tuxedoed people standing around was the rise of competitive Texas Hold'em and the popularity of it, the greater stakes, the knowability of a card game. You can look at a hand of cards, have it explained to you, and instantly be in the game. Whereas even backgammon with its simple rules kind of is a little bit more opaque.
Those players have mystique, but no kind of old world class, right? Like even the guys who are trying to dress up look like arrivistes in the poker world.
And I think that wasn't true maybe in 1967. If you were sitting and playing poker at a table in Monaco, you may have had maybe an air of sophistication a little bit better than now, where people are wearing baseball caps with Poker All-Stars sticker stuck to the front of it.
You got to have your wraparound sunglasses to scare off the competition.
And some of that is poker has changed a lot with the rise of the internet. But very recently, there's started to be a backgammon resurgence. And it is based, I think, largely in the nostalgia of people our age.
Remembering our dads doing it?
Remembering backgammon appearing in an advertisement for Moore cigarettes in Life magazine. And looking at it, and as kids, feeling like it was a game that had adult sophistication we could never understand.
There's a very narrow generation of kids that will fall for that.
Right.
Everyone before or after did not think of backgammon as a signifier of adulthood.
So there is a kind of Generation X millennial return to backgammon as a component of this. Like, why don't we have quality things anymore? Why don't we do what old people did and chop our own firewood, a return to innocence.
Knitting and jigsaw puzzles and that kind of stuff comes back too for the same reason.
But what we're having is a nostalgia for an extremely brief fad moment where the game put on airs of sophistication that it never really had.
We're like the last people to be tricked by backgammon. And that concludes Backgammon. Entry 090.EX2816, certificate number 31179, in the omnibus. You never talked about Octopussy. Does that trouble you that you left everyone hanging about Octopussy?
Octopussy, backgammon plays a role in the film.
I'm imagining Roger Moore dressed as a circus clown.
Roger Moore is
Berlin circus.
He's wearing a white dinner jacket and playing backgammon against the arch villain.
It's funny, they're right on the end of the trend. Octopussy's 83.
That's right.
So James Bond, as always, is the movie's coming out right after the thing was actually popular.
Just catching the tail end of it. But James realizes, and I call him James. He realizes
only the girls call him James.
He realizes that the bad guy has loaded dice, and he uses his loaded dice to roll double sixes whenever he needs it.
Has Q given him something that coincidentally will outwit loaded dice?
Well, what James does is he says he has one last roll, and he says he evokes something called player's privilege. I'm sorry, he invokes something called player's privilege. He says, player's privilege entitles me to use your dice on my final roll.
So there's some code of backgammon.
Yeah, if a player wants to use his opponent's dice, it's within the rules of the game, and he uses the bad guy's dice. He rolls double sixes and wins the high stakes game. Now that is a complete fiction.
There's no such rule.
There is no such rule, but it to the James Bond audience of 1983, it probably only added to the mystique of this game they imagined.
Speaking of mystique and sophistication, in our time, just regular average Joes who wanted to partake in that could follow John and me on social media at John Roderick or at Ken Jennings or at Omnibus Project. And really, if you still have the ability to do that, you absolutely should. Think what a blessing it will be in your life to know the secrets of adulthood there's no White Russians anymore, except for the ones that the dude drinks. So John and I really are all you have.
The grandsons and daughters of White Russians are still, I'm sure, hanging out in the student lounge at Brown University, saying that their names are Alexis de von Schminkelheim.
How did they get in?
They're not in the school. They're just in the student lounge.
They're just always hanging out in the lounges. You can send us email at theomnibusproject@gmail.com in our era. There was a government-provided system of couriers that would bring us physical objects through the U.S. mail. For example, here's a long defense of Southeast Ohio for you, John.
Oh, boy.
Including recommendations of where you should stay.
No, thanks.
I'm supposed to attend the weekly trivia contest at Pomeroy's Maple Lawn Brewery.
Do we get to go by the house where the serial killer from Silence of the Lambs had
the real one or the fake one?
His creepy dungeon.
And then there's a whole printout of some kind of concert series.
In Southern Ohio?
In Southern Ohio. G.E. Smith of the Saturday Night Live Band will be there.
Sure. He was married to Gilda Radner.
He was married to Gilda Radner. Very good. Good 70s SNL trivia.
Thank you.
The rest of these I've never heard of. But printouts of all of them, that's very helpful.
Thank you.
Our friend Sparky sent us a postcard. He's on the road now at some kind of train museum, I think. Seems to be behind. Looks like he's in California. It's behind some kind of locomotive. Locomotives have the worst instrumentation.
I disagree. Strongly.
Well, ergonomically, there's problems. All the little things are everywhere. You got to have 10 hands.
Well, yeah, because they're all mechanical instruments. They're not digital.
Redesign that stuff. Even if it's analog, give me a panel, for crying out loud.
Well, I mean, a diesel locomotive does not have that many controls. A diesel locomotive has like a brake and a throttle and a horn.
It doesn't give me a lot of confidence that this whole enterprise appears to be controlled by just hundreds of faucets that all have to be turned to the right.
Well, that's what they are. They are all hundreds of faucets.
I guess that's what Steam is.
Steam is a tricky thing.
Someone sent you the DVD of a Drew Barrymore movie called Mad Love that you almost appeared in.
Oh, I was supposed to be in that movie.
The person who sent it to you was an extra, in fact, in that movie. You could have met her.
Oh, well, maybe I did meet her on my way out as I was headed over to the Comet to get a beer.
She sent me a haiku about a frog. You get a DVD, I get a haiku about a frog. This is the story of my life.
And that's in keeping with our personalities.
I got a trivia book, but only because I blurbed it. We each got a copy of...
I love that you didn't even hold it up for me to see. You were like, oh, and here's my trivia book.
It's called...
in the pile.
It's called 100 bar trivia questions you should know.
Don't you already have one? If you blurbed it, they should have sent you one.
This was the one they sent me.
I see.
I don't want them to have my home address.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That actually came from the publisher. That's not a fan.
This says... It's by the author. The blurb says, if I didn't already know everything, I would have learned so much here. So, yeah, awesome. I'm kind of a dick on the back of the book.
Good work.
We also each got a copy of Little House on the Wasteland.
Laura Ingalls Y?
Laura Ingalls Y?
Or We?
Way? It resets the frontier adventures of the Ingalls family in some kind of post-apocalyptic nightmarescape. So they're still living their hardscrabble life, but it's not because it's the 19th century.
That's exciting.
It's a great and kind of a mashup idea. I haven't read this, but I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, I support it too.
Thank you, Laura Ingalls Y, if you exist. I forgot to start with, I said I was going to start with the Patreon and I didn't. One of the most important things you can do is not to send us your Laura Ingalls Wilder fan fiction, but to ensure the health of the omnibus, you could actually make a pledge and become a supporter of the program at patreon.com/omnibusproject. You and your fellow donors can congregate at the Futurelings group on Facebook, where you are currently yelling at people just for being good patriotic Canadians.
Yes, I am.
They had it coming.
They did.
They shouldn't have tried to be patriotic Canadians on our Facebook page.
No.
They're gonna
save that for your Canadian omnibus.
Is there a Canadian omnibus page?
Omnibuses.
In Canada, they drive omnibuses. And the similar subreddit. Did I talk about the mail but not give the address? If you want to send us random things like this, you can send them to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, in the third or fourth time that backgammon has become a fashionable and sophisticated game,
Every 100 years.
we have no idea how long our civilization survived, and perhaps backgammon, like all of the topics in the omnibus, is actually one of the harbingers of the end times. But we hope and pray that this catastrophe, we fear, either may never come, or at least doesn't come until we and our immediate progeny are gone.
Yeah, I'm not married to my grandkids.
No.
It's illegal in this state, for one thing.
Who even knows about your great grandkids? Like if they burn in a cataclysm, I mean, sure, shed a tear for them.
If
but
there's a tidal wave, I mean, I'm not asking for them to.
you just don't want Caitlin and Dylan to experience any hardship in their lives. You want them to be.
That was my job.
Right.
That was my number one job, is to keep my kids from getting hit by a meteorite.
And to raise them to be soft Americans who
will be unprepared for
right
for the eventual post-meteorite frenzy.
Their only calluses are on the insides of their thumbs.
But after that, after the first generation, I feel like I'm off duty. I've done my part.
Here. If the worst comes soon, however, before Ken and I meet our natural end, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.